Alright, welcome to video 2, where we are going to be, I'm getting rid of my charger so my camera is better, and we're going to be talking about neurons. So, neurons are excitable cells that receive different types of stimulation, and they are the building blocks of the nervous system. An important thing to know about neurons, is that it begins as a chemical communication, then turns into electrical, and then goes out as a chemical communication. That's important, and I will label it once I'm finished with all this. So, to begin, we have the dendrites, and the dendrites are these little branch-like structures, and they receive the signals from all the adjoining neurons. There should only be, one usually. Usually neurons will line up, one here, one here. I'll show you an example in a minute. After the dendrites receive the information signals chemically, they will travel into the soma, and the soma will process this information, and it is actually a lot like a cell. There's a nucleus and everything, and then it will travel down through the axon, which will transmit the information signal away from the neuron to the target of communication, which will be its terminal buttons. But before we get there, we need to talk about the myelin shield, which is what insulates the axon and provides faster information traveling. All right, after it travels there, which I do believe is when it becomes electric, cough, cough, nudge, nudge, it will become chemical again in the terminal buttons, which is where the information is sent chemically to another neuron. Now, what does this look like? Well, thank you. I'm glad you asked. I will show you. Oh, I meant to do a fancy transition. Oh well. So you have your first neuron here. This is going to be called the presynaptic. It is called that because when the two neurons connect like this, it's going to be called the synapse. The synapse is the connection. It is not to be confused with the synaptic cleft, which the synaptic cleft is actually the space between the neurons. This space here, that's the synaptic cleft. So we have this, and it'll meet this other neuron. This other neuron is going to be called the postsynaptic neuron. The reason that it's called the presynaptic and the postsynaptic is because the presynaptic neuron is the neuron with the information. After the synapse occurs, then the information has already passed, meaning it is postsynaptic. That's how you can remember that. You might not need to know that. I just do. All right. So, this is a close-up of the process that occurs during the synapse, which is the connection. Synapse is the connection. The cleft is the space. Okay. So, when this occurs, you will have neurotransmitters, which are these blue dots, and they carry the information, and they will go to the postsynaptic neuron number 2 over here, and they will fit into receptors, which are these little half circles along the edge. If they're blue, then they are occupied receptors. If they are black, they're unoccupied, and they're looking for one of these little blue dots to go into them. We're not going to question why there are multiple blue dots and not enough receptors, okay? Don't worry about it. All right, so that is what happens there. And then after the information gets passed on, obviously this happens very, very quickly because I'm moving and this is what's happening inside of me, which is kind of like crazy to think about, but it's true. After that happens, it just continuously keeps happening until eventually, if it's a motor command that's being sent, it will transfer to a tissue, a muscle, one of those things. And the process is different. We don't need to really know that though. All right, enough about all this fanciness. We need to learn about our nervous system. We went a little backwards and learned about the neurons first. Your nervous system is going to be split up into these two parts. You have the central, which is made up of your spinal cord and your brain, and you also have your peripheral, which is made up of all the other nerves extending throughout your body. The peripheral is going to be split up into two more parts called the somatic and the autonomic. The somatic controls your conscious and controlled tasks, while the autonomic performs your unconscious controlled tasks. Notice how they are both controlled, however. So, a good way to remember it is that somatic, soma. The soma is like a cell in the neuron, and the cell is always alive and moving. Therefore, the somatic is conscious. The autonomic sounds a lot like autopilot, the auto. And that is when it's unconscious, because when you go on autopilot mode, you're unconscious. All right, the two types of autonomic systems? Sure. Are sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic are accelerators for organs. They prepare body for intense physical activities. They are definitely the active of the two. The parasympathetic is definitely the more relaxed. It gives you a break and it begins to slow down your body and its functions. An example of each would be going to sleep or getting ready to start walking in gym class for Walktober. And in case you didn't get it, this is the Walktober, this is getting ready for sleep. But I think it's relatively self-explanatory. All right. After we learned about your peripheral nervous system, we learned about the brain and all of the stuff that is in your central nervous system. Notice how I'm struggling a little bit. My brain is not functioning quite as well as it was, but that's okay. This is going to be in the extra video, so this video is not nearly as long, and also because we didn't spend as much time on this information. All right. See ya.